The girl lived in a small, quiet village nestled between rolling hills and dense forests, a place where the air was fresh, and the rhythm of life followed the rising and setting of the sun. Her days were simple yet filled with purpose, and her gentle nature made her beloved by most who knew her. She woke each morning with the first light, tending to her modest home and caring for the small garden that provided vegetables and herbs for her family. Her hands, though calloused from daily labor, moved with care and precision, whether she was preparing a simple meal, mending clothes, or tending to the animals that roamed the yard. Her family, while not wealthy, lived with warmth and togetherness. Her parents had instilled in her values of kindness, honesty, and diligence, and she had embraced them fully. She always found time to assist neighbors, carrying water from the well for an elderly woman, helping children with their chores, or offering a comforting word to someone troubled by life's hardships. Her humility never diminished her joy. In fact, she often found fulfillment in the smallest acts of service, believing that goodness, even when unnoticed, carried its own reward. Friends in the village gravitated toward her gentle presence. Children were drawn to her laughter and the patience she showed in teaching them simple tasks. Women admired her skill in weaving and cooking, often seeking her advice or assistance in their daily lives. Men respected her for her integrity, knowing she spoke honestly and acted fairly, never taking advantage of others. Her influence in the village, though subtle, was profound, as she represented a living example of compassion and resilience. Despite the simplicity of her life, the girl carried a quiet strength. She accepted hardships without complaint and faced challenges with a steady heart. Even when chores were demanding or the weather harsh, she remained composed, her spirit unbroken. Her resilience was rooted not in defiance, but in a deep understanding of herself and the world around her. She moved through life with grace, never seeking recognition or reward, yet earning the admiration and respect of all who observed her. Her daily routine was punctuated by small moments of joy. She would pause to admire the sunrise over the hills, to listen to birdsong while working in the garden, or to share a simple meal with family. These moments, though seemingly ordinary, were infused with a sense of gratitude and mindfulness that shaped her perspective on life. Her humility allowed her to find contentment in what others might see as ordinary, and this grounded her, making her a source of calm and reassurance in a village that often experienced its share of strife. Even in her interactions with her family, her kindness shone. She cared for younger siblings, offering gentle guidance and playful encouragement. With her parents, she shared quiet moments of companionship, helping with tasks and listening attentively to their concerns. In every relationship, she demonstrated empathy, understanding, and patience, traits that made her a cherished member of the community. The villagers often marveled at her natural disposition. They noticed how animals seemed to trust her instinctively, how plants thrived under her care, and how her words could soothe even the most troubled heart. While some may have envied her serenity and the quiet admiration she inspired, few could deny the genuine goodness she radiated. Her life, though simple, was rich in human connection, compassion, and dignity, setting a standard for kindness and moral integrity that would resonate far beyond her humble home. In this peaceful rhythm, the girl thrived, unaware that her life, her humility, and her unwavering kindness were laying the foundation for the trials and extraordinary events that were yet to come. Her days of serenity were the calm before a storm, a testament to the strength and virtue that would soon be tested in ways that would challenge not only her body but the very forces of fate and justice itself. In the quiet village, where life often moved at a predictable rhythm, not everyone welcomed the girl's gentle presence and unwavering goodness. While many admired her kindness, a few hearts brimmed with envy and resentment. Some villagers whispered behind closed doors, their words laced with subtle malice, as they observed the respect and attention she naturally drew. Her diligence in helping others, her humble demeanor, and the effortless grace with which she navigated her daily tasks became the subject of jealousy. Those who had once considered themselves superior, by wealth, strength, or social position, found themselves uneasy in her presence, their pride pricked by her quiet competence and the admiration she inspired. The first sparks of resentment often came from her own family, particularly those who felt threatened by the girl's virtues. A stepmother, whose heart was hardened by envy, began to notice how villagers favored the girl's advice and assistance over her own. Each smile the girl received from neighbors, every gesture of gratitude she earned, became a reminder of her stepmother's perceived inadequacy. In the shadows, she muttered complaints about the girl's unearned attention, framing her kindness as cunning or manipulative. Even siblings, influenced by parental sentiment and the subtle pressures of rivalry, began to cast sideways glances, their admiration tainted by jealousy. Outside the home, the villagers' envy took root in quieter, more insidious ways. A merchant who had once praised her skill in mending clothes now whispered to neighbors about how she showed off her talent. Women who had sought her guidance in cooking or weaving started to murmur that the girl was overly proud, that her patience masked a desire for superiority. Children, mimicking their parents, began to tease her lightly, questioning her every action, turning admiration into suspicion. The seeds of jealousy, planted in secret, began to grow, nourished by idle gossip and half-truths. Small incidents, seemingly harmless at first, started to accumulate. A misplaced basket of vegetables would be blamed on her, a broken clay pot whispered to have been caused by carelessness. Rumors circulated that she had used charms or mystical arts to attract the favor of the villagers, that her quiet dignity was a front hiding darker intentions. These whispers, subtle but persistent, created an invisible pressure around her, casting shadows over her once peaceful interactions. Friends who had once confided in her hesitated, uncertain whether proximity to her might bring disfavor from others. The cruel family members, emboldened by these murmurs, began plotting to diminish her influence and undermine her reputation. They exchanged sly glances, formulated half-truths, and ensured that small inconveniences or misunderstandings were attributed to her. The girl, patient and kind, noticed the shift in atmosphere but remained unsure of its source, attributing it to human inconsistency rather than deliberate malice. Her gentle nature made her slow to suspect the depth of envy festering in the hearts around her, a blindness that would soon expose her to great danger. Yet even as jealousy and resentment grew, the girl's virtues shone unmistakably to those with clear sight. Some villagers quietly observed, noting how her patience never wavered, how she continued helping others despite slights, and how her demeanor remained calm and composed. These individuals understood that envy often disguised itself as reasoned criticism, but her actions and integrity spoke louder than the murmurs of the envious. The tension, subtle at first, began to weave through daily life. Every smile directed toward her, every act of kindness, was now a spark to the simmering resentment of rivals. What had once been a village of simple interactions started to feel like a stage set for conflict, with whispers, suspicious glances, and quiet plotting forming the undercurrent of her life. The seeds of jealousy had been sown deep, watered by human envy and fear of virtue surpassing their own, and they would soon bear fruit in ways both cruel and extraordinary. In the dim corners of the village, where shadows lengthened and whispers carried farther than light, a dangerous plan began to take shape. Those whose envy had festered into resentment gathered in secret, away from the watchful eyes of the kind-hearted villagers who still admired her. The girl's virtues, once celebrated, had now become the catalyst for the cruelest of intentions. With each passing day the conspirators' minds grew darker, and their conversations more sinister. They spoke in hushed tones, glancing over their shoulders to ensure no innocent ears would hear the plotting that would soon change the girl's life forever. At first, the plan seemed simple in their minds: remove her from the village, punish her, and humiliate her for daring to be virtuous. But as their envy deepened, so too did the cruelty of their scheme. They spoke of heavy stones, of burying her alive beneath the weight of their own malice. Each stone, carefully chosen and positioned, became a symbol of the hatred they harbored. They debated the logistics, ensuring that the act would be carried out where no one could intervene, where the girl would be trapped and powerless beneath the crushing weight. Their voices, once hushed, grew eager with anticipation, revealing the twisted satisfaction they derived from imagining her helplessness. As they plotted, the conspirators took care to avoid detection. They spoke in coded phrases, used signals known only to them, and timed their actions for moments when the village would be distracted by routine chores or celebrations. They drew maps of secluded areas, identified vantage points to keep watch, and rehearsed how they would lure her without raising suspicion. Each step, meticulously planned, heightened the tension in the air. It was as if the village itself held its breath, sensing the impending danger that lurked just beyond the girl's awareness. While the conspirators reveled in their dark intentions, there were subtle hints that not all was as it seemed. The wind seemed to carry whispers of warning, and animals, usually indifferent, moved restlessly when the conspirators approached. Though these signs were easy to dismiss, they foreshadowed a force greater than mere human cruelty at work. The tension in the village grew palpable, a quiet dread that seemed to press down upon every home and street, signaling that something extraordinary was about to unfold. The girl, meanwhile, remained unaware of the plotting around her. She continued her daily routines, tending to her garden, helping neighbors, and performing her chores with the same grace and diligence that had long defined her life. Yet, the undercurrents of envy and malice were closing in, shaping a trap from which she would find no ordinary escape. The conspirators' excitement grew with each passing day, their imagination fueling a sense of inevitability that the girl's suffering was imminent. Even among the conspirators, unease occasionally flickered. Some glanced at the sky, recalling stories of misfortunes that befell those who acted with cruelty. Others felt a twinge of guilt, quickly suppressed by their lust for revenge. These fleeting doubts did little to slow their preparations. Instead, they served to intensify the suspense, as if fate itself were quietly waiting for the moment to intervene. By the time their preparations were complete, the stones were ready, the site secluded, and the girl unsuspecting. The tension had reached its peak, a coiled energy that threatened to explode. The village, still unaware of the imminent act, went about its routines, blind to the danger lurking at the edges of ordinary life. The stage was set for a confrontation between innocence and cruelty, a moment that would reveal not only the girl's resilience but also the extraordinary power that lay dormant, waiting to respond to injustice in a way that no human hand could control. The day of betrayal arrived quietly, cloaked in the ordinary sounds of the village. Birds sang as if nothing were amiss, and the wind whispered softly through the trees, yet beneath this calm, a dark plan waited to unfold. The conspirators moved with calculated precision, luring the girl to the secluded site under the guise of a chore or urgent errand. She followed with her usual trust, unaware of the danger that had been carefully plotted around her. Her footsteps were light, her mind occupied with mundane concerns, entirely unsuspecting of the cruelty awaiting her. As she reached the designated spot, the conspirators struck with sudden force. Strong hands grabbed her arms, pulling her to the ground before she could even call out. Shock and confusion flooded her senses. She struggled, but the numbers and strength of those who betrayed her left her powerless. Her heart raced, pounding in her chest like a drum of impending doom, while her eyes darted to every face she had once trusted, now twisted with envy and malice. The realization that those she had known were the source of this terror sent a shiver through her body. The conspirators worked quickly, piling heavy stones around her. The weight of each rock, carefully chosen for its crushing heft, pressed against her small frame. She gasped at the sudden heaviness, the rough edges biting against her skin and clothes. Dust rose in clouds, filling her nostrils and making it hard to breathe, while the shadows cast by the stones created a dark cage around her. Panic threatened to overtake her, but she forced herself to remain still, focusing on her breath, trying to stave off the rising fear that clawed at her chest. Buried beneath the stones, she felt the world shrink into darkness. The cold weight of the rocks pressed down, making her joints ache and her muscles scream. Every movement she attempted seemed futile, as if the earth itself had conspired to trap her. Shock mingled with disbelief. How could people she had trusted commit such a horrendous act? Her mind raced, recalling moments of kindness and laughter that now seemed painfully distant, replaced by the harsh reality of betrayal and cruelty. Amidst the fear, she whispered silent prayers, words of hope and plea carried only to the skies or some unseen force that might hear her. She begged for strength, for courage, and for a way to endure what seemed an impossible fate. Her voice, though muffled by the weight of stone, echoed in her mind, reinforcing a quiet resilience that refused to be extinguished. She reminded herself of the virtues that had guided her life: patience, kindness, and inner strength, clinging to these principles as a lifeline in the suffocating darkness. The conspirators, confident in their success, stepped back to admire their work, unaware that forces far greater than their envy were stirring. The girl remained beneath the stones, her body pressed to the ground, yet her spirit refused to yield. In the oppressive silence, there was a subtle shift, almost imperceptible at first, a faint vibration, a gentle hum through the earth, as if the ground itself acknowledged her innocence and suffering. Though fear still gripped her, a quiet certainty began to blossom within her. She was not entirely alone, and perhaps even in this darkest hour, justice had not abandoned her. Time stretched, each moment a battle between despair and hope. Her heart continued to pound, but each beat reminded her of her enduring strength. Though trapped, helpless, and surrounded by the cold, unyielding stones, the girl's resolve deepened. She closed her eyes, letting her silent prayers anchor her, clinging to the belief that her innocence, her life, and her spirit were worth protecting, and that those who had wronged her would soon face the consequences of their cruelty. As the girl lay trapped beneath the heavy stones, the oppressive weight pressing down on her small frame, a subtle tremor ran through the earth beneath her. At first, it was so faint that she thought it might be her imagination. A vibration, a whisper of movement that barely stirred the dust at her nose. But soon the shifts became undeniable. The stones, once immovable and cruelly placed, began to tremble, quivering as if alive. A low hum seemed to emanate from the earth itself, resonating through her bones, filling her heart with an unfamiliar mixture of awe and cautious hope. The conspirators, still lingering nearby, had not noticed the faint beginnings of what was to come. They were too consumed with their triumph, unaware that their cruelty had awakened something far greater than their envy. The ground beneath them remained steady, untouched by the girl's presence. Yet beneath the pile of stones, her spirit, pure and resilient, began to assert itself. It was as if her suffering, her unwavering patience, and her inner virtue were calling to the world around her, a quiet yet unstoppable force demanding acknowledgement. A single stone shifted slightly, rolling just enough to relieve a fraction of the pressure on her chest. She gasped at the unexpected motion, a mixture of fear and wonder flooding her senses. Slowly, deliberately, the rocks above her began to adjust, as if guided by invisible hands. Dust fell gently around her face, and the harsh weight that had threatened to crush her seemed to soften. The air felt lighter, carrying a faint warmth that contrasted sharply with the cold, harsh reality of the stones. The girl realized with a quiet certainty that her virtue, her patience, her courage, her enduring spirit, was influencing the world around her. The trembling of the stones grew more pronounced, and small cracks appeared between the massive rocks. Light from the sun, filtering through the gaps, illuminated her face and the space around her. The cracks widened, not violently, but with deliberate care, as though the earth itself had taken pity on her and was working to undo the injustice. The girl felt a strange energy coursing through her, an almost tangible connection to the soil beneath her body. It was as if every act of cruelty she had endured had fueled a power rooted in the very ground, ready to protect her in the face of human malice. From above, the conspirators finally noticed the subtle shifting, but disbelief clouded their minds. "It must be the stones settling," one muttered nervously, while another hesitated, sensing something uncanny but refusing to acknowledge it. Yet the subtle movements continued, gradually becoming more forceful. The pile of stones began to lift ever so slightly, creating a small space, a breath of freedom for the girl. Her heart swelled with hope as she whispered a silent prayer of gratitude, realizing that the world itself had responded to her suffering, not with vengeance, but with a gentle, inevitable justice that respected her innocence. The earth, alive with mystical energy, seemed to resonate with her heartbeat. Roots and soil shifted beneath her, aligning and supporting her, guiding her toward release without harm. The hum from the ground grew into a soothing vibration, wrapping around her like a protective cloak. She sensed a presence not visible but unmistakable, a guardian spirit born from her own resilience and virtue, working in tandem with the living earth to right the wrongs of those who had wronged her. As the stones continued their slow, deliberate movement, the girl's fear transformed into quiet determination. She understood that her spirit, coupled with the extraordinary response of the earth, had begun to turn the tide. The cruelty that had sought to crush her would not prevail. Instead, the natural and mystical world had aligned itself in her favor, setting the stage for an extraordinary reckoning that would soon follow, guided by the unyielding power of her innocence and virtue. As the last heavy stone shifted and eased the girl's weight, the earth seemed to awaken fully, responding not just to her presence but to the injustice that had been committed. What had been gentle tremors now surged with unstoppable energy. With a deep, rumbling roar, the stones began to move with purpose, rolling and tumbling away from her like obedient servants of an unseen force. Each boulder, once a weapon intended to crush her, now became an instrument of retribution, hurtling toward the very hands that had plotted her harm. The conspirators, still gloating over their perceived victory, were the first to notice the unnatural movement. Their laughter faltered, replaced by confusion and mounting dread. The ground shook beneath their feet as the stones accelerated toward them, each one imbued with a power beyond human comprehension. The air filled with the sharp, grinding sound of rock scraping against rock, echoing through the village and warning of the chaos about to descend. Panic overtook reason as they realized their plot had backfired catastrophically. Dust and small pebbles erupted into the air as the stones rolled with terrifying precision. They seemed guided by intention, each one seeking out the heart of those whose cruelty had summoned this vengeance. The conspirators ran in blind desperation, but the terrain itself conspired against them. Loose soil, hidden roots, and sudden cracks tripped their flight, amplifying their terror. Fear twisted their faces, their eyes wide with disbelief as they realized no earthly skill could save them from the wrath they had unwittingly provoked. The chaos unfolded like a scene from a nightmare. Large boulders slammed into walls, shattering wood and stone, while smaller stones ricocheted unpredictably, creating a storm of destruction. Villagers who had gathered at a distance gasped in horror and awe, unable to look away from the spectacle. The stones moved with almost sentient awareness, sparing the innocent yet striking only those who had intended harm. Each impact resonated through the air, a thunderous declaration that the earth itself was exacting justice for the cruelty inflicted upon the girl. The conspirators' screams echoed as they were struck and scattered. Their frantic attempts to flee were futile against the calculated might of the stones. Some tripped and fell into ditches, others were crushed under the sheer weight of the rolling boulders, and all felt the overwhelming presence of a force far beyond human understanding. Panic turned into despair as the earth's judgment played out before their terrified eyes, the very soil and rock rising to defend the girl they had sought to destroy. Amid the chaos, the girl remained untouched, almost ethereal in her calm. The ground beneath her stabilized, a safe haven amidst the unfolding storm of vengeance. Her body, though pressed beneath stones only moments before, now radiated a quiet strength. The villagers whispered among themselves, watching the powerful force of nature in awe, realizing that justice had taken form not through human hands but through the mystical alignment of the girl's virtue and the world around her. The aftermath of the stone's revenge left a scar on the land and a profound lesson etched into the hearts of all who witnessed it. The conspirators were humbled, terrified, and forever marked by the experience. The village itself seemed to sigh in relief as order returned, yet the memory of the earth's wrath remained vivid, a warning of the consequences of cruelty and injustice. In that moment it was clear, the girl's virtue had called forth the strength of the earth itself, and those who dared harm her had paid the ultimate price. The village had never witnessed anything like it. The cacophony of rolling stones, shattering wood and terrified screams faded into echoes as the dust settled. Villagers emerged cautiously from their hiding places, eyes wide and hearts pounding, unsure whether what they had just seen was real or a vision born of collective fear. Mothers clutched their children, traders stared with slack-jawed astonishment, and elders muttered prayers, attempting to reconcile the impossible events with their understanding of the world. The very air seemed charged with the remnants of the mystical force that had just enacted judgment. As the dust hung in the air, small pebbles still vibrated from the rolling stones, reminding everyone that the earth itself had taken a stand. Villagers whispered among themselves, voices trembling with awe and fear. "Did you see the stones move on their own?" one asked. "It is as if the land itself answers her call," replied another, eyes still fixed on the girl, who now stood serene and unharmed amid the chaos. The realization that a human being could summon such protection defied logic and reason, yet it was impossible to deny the evidence before their eyes. Those who had mocked or harmed her were either fleeing in terror, nursing bruises and injuries, or lying in the wreckage, humbled by the power they had provoked. The contrast between the girl's untouched form and the ruined surroundings amplified the villagers' sense of disbelief. Whispers of supernatural intervention began to weave through the crowd, forming rumors that spread faster than wildfire. "She is chosen by the spirits," someone murmured. "The earth protects those who are pure of heart," said another, voice barely audible over the collective murmurs. Every whisper added weight to her growing legend, transforming fear into reverence. Some villagers approached hesitantly, their steps tentative, unsure if they should offer aid or merely observe. They noticed her calm demeanor, the quiet authority she radiated, and the subtle shimmer of energy that seemed to linger around her. Even the bravest among them hesitated to speak directly, sensing an unspoken power that demanded respect. The girl's eyes, steady and resolute, met theirs without anger or accusation, yet conveyed a silent acknowledgement of her ordeal and the justice that had been served. Elders, who had long guided the village with their wisdom, convened in murmured discussion. They debated whether this was a divine sign, a warning, or a manifestation of mystical power that they could neither explain nor control. "We must honor her," one elder finally stated, his voice tinged with fear and respect. "To ignore this is to invite the same wrath upon ourselves." The villagers, sensing the gravity of his words, nodded solemnly, their previous attitudes of envy and skepticism replaced with cautious reverence. As days passed, the story of the girl's ordeal spread beyond the village. Travelers recounted the events to neighboring communities, embellishing details with awe but never altering the truth of her untouched form amid the chaos. The tale grew into legend, the girl whose innocence and virtue had invoked the very earth to protect her, punishing the wicked and elevating the righteous. Even within the village, children repeated the story at the hearth, merchants whispered it across market stalls, and families recounted it as a warning against cruelty. The girl, meanwhile, continued her life quietly, her demeanor unchanged, yet the villagers treated her with a newfound respect. They avoided cruelty, approached her with humility, and watched her carefully, knowing that her presence was protected by a force far beyond human understanding. Fear and reverence intertwined, and the village slowly learned that justice could manifest in unexpected, extraordinary ways, often through those they had underestimated or wronged. As the last echoes of chaos faded, the girl rose slowly from the debris, her form untouched and serene. The weight of the stones, which had threatened to crush her mere moments before, seemed to have passed harmlessly over her, leaving her dignity and composure intact. Dust clung lightly to her clothes, and a faint shimmer of light reflected from her hair, as if the earth itself had anointed her with a subtle glow of protection. She moved with grace, each step measured and calm, a stark contrast to the panicked and bloodied figures of those who had sought to harm her. The villagers, still scattered around the scene, held their breath. Some could not believe what they were seeing, others fell to their knees in reverence, overwhelmed by awe and fear. Whispers spread like wildfire, "She has emerged unscathed, the earth itself favors her." Even those who had doubted or ignored her before now felt a profound shift in their perception. This was no ordinary girl. They realized almost instinctively that she carried a force beyond comprehension, a quiet yet unstoppable power rooted in her virtue and resilience. In stark contrast, the conspirators were left reeling in the aftermath of their own cruelty. Some lay sprawled across the broken earth, nursing injuries inflicted by the rolling stones. Others stumbled and cowered, their faces pale with terror, as the realization of their misdeeds sank deep into their consciousness. They had sought to bury her, to erase her presence, yet it was their own arrogance and malice that had brought them to ruin. Every attempt at dominance had been overturned, and the consequences of their cruelty had been delivered by the very force they had underestimated. The girl's calm presence in the midst of destruction served as a beacon to the villagers. Her eyes, steady and resolute, scanned the scene, not with anger but with quiet understanding. There was no gloating, no desire for revenge. The earth had executed justice on her behalf, and she remained above the chaos, a living testament to endurance, purity, and the subtle strength of the innocent. The juxtaposition of her tranquility against the turmoil surrounding her left an indelible impression on all who witnessed it. As she stepped fully free from the scattered stones, a hush fell over the crowd. Children stared wide-eyed, merchants lowered their heads in awe, and elders whispered prayers of gratitude and caution. The girl's emergence was symbolic, a powerful statement that virtue, patience, and resilience could withstand even the most deliberate acts of cruelty. Every footstep she took seemed to reinforce the lesson. Injustice and malice would inevitably be overturned when faced with the purity of heart and the protection of forces greater than human reckoning. Even the landscape seemed to acknowledge her presence. The dust settled into neat patterns around her, the soil appeared nourished rather than disturbed, and a gentle breeze carried with it the faint scent of renewal. It was as if the earth itself bowed in acknowledgement, celebrating her survival and marking the space as sacred. Villagers instinctively knew that her path forward would be guided and protected, and that any future attempts to harm her would be met with consequences equally swift and unavoidable. In that moment she became more than a girl, she became a symbol. The contrast between her calm resilience and the shattered, desperate figures of the conspirators underscored the profound moral of the tale. Kindness, patience, and virtue were not weaknesses to be exploited, but sources of protection and power, capable of transforming even the gravest injustice into a lesson for all who bore witness. Her emergence was a living declaration that true strength often lay not in cruelty or dominance, but in quiet endurance and moral integrity. The village slowly absorbed the magnitude of what had just occurred. The air was thick with awe, fear, and a deep sense of reflection. The girl, having emerged unscathed from the near-fatal attempt on her life, stood as a living testament to resilience and the power of virtue. The villagers, who had once been casual witnesses or passive participants in the conspirators' schemes, now realized the cost of envy and cruelty. The consequences of their actions were no longer theoretical. They had been enacted in the most vivid, undeniable way. The conspirators themselves faced immediate repercussions. Those who had orchestrated the girl's burial beneath the stones were left physically and emotionally shattered. Some had suffered injuries from the very stones they had intended as weapons, while others were paralyzed by fear, unable to act, speak, or defend themselves. Their attempts at malice had rebounded upon them, leaving them humiliated and powerless in the eyes of the entire community. What had begun as petty envy or greed had escalated into a public spectacle of justice that none could ignore. Beyond the physical consequences, the conspirators faced social ruin. Villagers who had once feared or tolerated their cruelty now recoiled from them, whispering cautionary tales and refusing to engage in trade, conversation, or collaboration. Their reputations crumbled under the weight of their misdeeds, and even close allies distanced themselves to avoid sharing in the shame. In a community so tightly knit, where word and deed traveled swiftly, the fall of the conspirators served as a warning to all. Malice and envy against the innocent could never escape accountability. At the same time, the girl's unwavering dignity and the mystical intervention of the earth elevated her status within the village. She became a symbol not only of endurance but of divine justice, a living lesson in the consequences of cruelty and the protective power that virtue can summon. Villagers, once indifferent or complicit, now treated her with respect and reverence. Children whispered her story at play, elders invoked her name when teaching lessons, and travelers carried word of her survival far beyond the village borders. Her presence reminded everyone that the universe, through whatever mystical or natural force, recognized and corrected injustice. The moral clarity of the event could not be ignored. The conspirators' downfall illustrated that cruelty was inherently self-destructive. Envy, malice, and greed, when acted upon, not only endangered the innocent but also eroded the perpetrator's own safety and standing. The village itself seemed to internalize the lesson. Actions against the pure of heart invite retribution, whether through divine forces, natural balance, or communal judgment. Each whispered retelling emphasized that malice begets ruin, and patience, integrity, and kindness are protected in ways that transcend ordinary understanding. Even after the immediate events subsided, the psychological impact endured. Villagers recounted the precise moment the stones rolled back, the conspirators' terrified expressions, and the girl's calm emergence. The story became a permanent fixture in the moral consciousness of the community, guiding behavior, moderating envy, and fostering empathy. No one would forget how easily cruelty could be met with swift, unerring justice and how innocence, when combined with resilience, was a force that demanded respect. In the end, justice had been served not through vengeance or anger, but through the alignment of natural and mystical forces with virtue. The conspirators' ruin was a direct consequence of their own malice, while the girl's survival affirmed the protective power of integrity and courage. Her story, now legendary, reminded all who heard it that wrongdoing carries consequences, that envy and cruelty are paths to self-destruction, and that the universe often sides with those who endure with dignity. Word of the girl's miraculous survival and the stone's revenge spread quickly, carried by travelers, merchants, and wandering storytellers. Each retelling added layers of awe and reverence, and soon neighboring villages were abuzz with the tale of the girl who had faced death beneath a pile of heavy stones, only to emerge untouched while her enemies were crushed. People spoke in hushed tones about the power of virtue and the terrifying consequences of cruelty, and the story became a parable that transcended generations. Villagers recounted the vivid details. The conspirators' hasty plotting, the girl's fearful yet dignified composure, the mystical shifting of the stones, and the catastrophic reversal that left her unharmed while those who sought her harm were punished. The imagery was powerful, the heavy stones rolling with unstoppable force, the terrified faces of the conspirators, and the serene, glowing figure of the girl rising above it all. Each element emphasized the moral truth at the heart of the tale. The universe, through mystical, natural, or divine means, intervenes to protect innocence and punish malice. As the story spread, it began to influence behavior and social norms. Villagers and travelers alike became more mindful of their actions, particularly in how they treated those who were vulnerable or kind-hearted. Parents used the tale to teach their children about empathy and respect, emphasizing that cruelty and envy invite forces beyond human understanding. Merchants told it as a warning that greed and deceit could lead to personal ruin, and elders cited it during disputes to encourage fairness and justice. In this way, the girl's experience became a living moral guide for countless communities. The legend also elevated the girl herself into a figure of reverence. She was no longer just a young woman of the village. She became a symbol of resilience, virtue, and the protective power of moral integrity. People approached her with respect, seeking guidance, blessings, or simply wishing to witness the person whose righteousness had invoked such extraordinary events. The narrative reinforced the idea that goodness is a source of strength, and that those who act with kindness and patience, even in the face of cruelty, are shielded by forces far greater than themselves. Beyond practical lessons, the story carried a spiritual and mystical undertone. Many interpreted the rolling stones and the girl's untouched emergence as a manifestation of cosmic justice. Priests, shamans, and spiritual guides invoked the story in their teachings, explaining that the earth and the elements themselves recognize virtue and punish wrongdoing. The legend became intertwined with local beliefs, rituals, and storytelling traditions, ensuring that it would be remembered for generations and shaping the collective consciousness of the region. Ultimately, the tale's enduring message was clear and universally understood. Those who harm the innocent invite forces beyond their control. Envy, malice, and cruelty are inherently dangerous, not only morally but practically, as the universe conspires against unjust actions. The girl's survival and the conspirators' downfall embodied this principle in a way that was both memorable and profound, ensuring that the story would remain a moral compass for villages far and wide. Through repeated retellings, the girl and the rolling stones became a symbol, a legend, and a moral benchmark. Children learned courage and patience, adults remembered the peril of envy, and communities internalized the lesson that justice, whether human or mystical, cannot be avoided. The girl's story transcended time, transforming into an eternal reminder that virtue is protected and cruelty carries consequences far beyond human reckoning.